Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hey Otterites, welcome to episode 105. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis.
So we are eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking this episode.
Oh yeah.
All right.
As Francis mentioned in our exit segment last episode, this is one that I kind of kicked out to the fellas because I wanted to talk about this sort of unique little spot in the history of movies in the U.S. of these car-centric, car chase-centric films, primarily set in the South, and turns out kind of primarily starring Burt Reynolds. But, you know, when you start talking car chases, you got to get a little broader than that anyway.
Well, you know why it's set in the South? There's too much traffic up north.
Yeah. But, I mean, there was just this movement of how do you still be a rebel in the South in the 1970s? Well, you drive your car really fast. But first, I guess we ought to start again with what's pretty much considered the number one car chase ever put on film. That I think Francis has said this, that it's the blueprint. It's the one that tells directors and filmmakers car chases will work on
That's
film.
right. And they're also damn cheap. All think with just a little bit of planning.
Well, that depends because you can go through a lot of cars.
Yeah, if it's not done well.
Yeah, but again, you can kind of reuse a different camera angle for the same.
Betcha.
And
That's
kind of
right. It's a new way of bringing excitement and something that people get because everybody's. And it's not accidental that the movie that you're talking about came out in '68.
Yeah,
that's the beginning of driving for pleasure. You might make
muscle car era too.
There's something to be said because now families have more than one car. Starting around that time, they're starting to. So that's when you realize
that's because the wives, the mothers, are starting to go into the workforce.
That's right.
More full time.
That's right.
Which goes back to contraception being more widely available.
That's right.
Because they're not always having kids.
The birth rate slows down.
Birth rate drops, and now.
But that film, I didn't really want to talk about contraception, but okay.
Well, I'm just saying,
it's
culturally, it's context.
It's context, brother. It's context. You're right. But that film is Bullet.
Right.
A great detective film. Very stylish. Starring the king of cool, Steve McQueen.
Right.
We're going to do an episode on Steve McQueen.
It might be his greatest role, and that's saying a lot because he's got a whole lot of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, Virgil Hiltz in The Great Escape is also kind of...
Great Escape is a hard one to top.
Yeah. And The Magnificent Seven.
I love The Magnificent
Seven. Vin. But yeah, Bullet, he is center stage, sharing the screen with a 68 Mustang Fastback and a Dodge
I was going to talk
Charger.
about Jacqueline Bisset there for a minute.
Well, just as an aside, yes, she is stunning in that film.
Yes.
Again, that's a very early part in her career, and wow, is she amazing. And does a terrific job in really what amounts to kind of a thankless part. Easily forgettable part, unfortunately, but she does a tremendous job really pushing that Bullet character. Well, what are you really all about? But again, we want to talk about the car chases.
Yeah.
And
you gotta have to start with Bullet because if you were to hold somebody down saying what's the greatest car chase ever filmed, most people will automatically, if they think about it, if they know anything about movies, they're going to say Bullet.
It's Bullet.
I don't know if most people are going to do that. I think most people are going to go Smokey and the Bandit.
Well, there's truth to that too.
I think
but
it
again,
depends on
your age. I was going to say the same thing because
they're barely 10 years apart, and this far away from that time. I'm just thinking more people
it's still
are going to go.
A younger person's going to say Fast and Furious
because there's been so many of those.
Yes.
Which kind of institutionalized the entire concept, which is, in many respects, that wasn't done much because the Bullet is not a car chase movie. It's just got a hell of a car chase as part of the movie.
Yeah.
Whereas Smokey and the Bandit,
it's entirely
a chase. It's right.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a turning up the volume on that concept, which I think is one of the reasons why it stands kind of as the flag planted in the sand when it comes to this concept.
And it's not that Bullet even has the first car chase as a central part of it, because as we talked about, for instance, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World is literally
Yeah, it's a lot of cars going to the same place.
Now, in a way, that's a car chase slash race.
Right.
And we did point out in the show prep, there's a difference between racing movies and car chase movies.
Right.
Sometimes it's a mad world. It's kind of both.
Yeah.
But it's all about being in the cars, going somewhere really fast.
Well, I mean, James Bond and Goldfinger, it's one of the classics when he's in the Aston Martin for the first time and he's letting loose, pushing the ejector seat button. I'm sorry, that's one of the best moments in the whole damn thing. Boom, boom, I've often threatened my wife saying, watch out, I have an ejector seat button. She just rolls her eyes, of course.
She does it a lot.
Absolutely she does. Yeah. She says,
you probably deserve it.
I probably deserve it. That's exactly
I was going to ask if it was a medical condition.
But
I thought it was her fault.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. There's this moment in film. They're moving away from the epics. They're moving away from fantasy films. And you get this cinema verite, this new cinema in the late 60s, early 70s that's supposed to be gritty and realistic. Bullet's part of that.
It's grounded in a world we know, if nothing else.
Right.
That's really the point.
Yeah,
and they realized
modern, not historical.
And they realized not only is this popular and people desire it, it's also cheaper because you don't have the costumes, you don't have a lot. There's a whole lot of things. You don't have to recreate an ancient world. You can make this outside your door. In fact, people want that.
Well, and I think that's a reaction to what was going on in the '60s and with the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. Fantasy no longer sufficed because the reality was so grim that the fantasy paled anymore.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about that in television, the whole rural purge. All of a sudden, Gomer Pyle and the Beverly Hillbillies and stuff, that's gone. We don't want that anymore.
Right.
We want Maude. We want All in the Family.
Well, and it was a way to I guess, these kind of movies, those kind of TV shows, it's a way to help connect better to the modern world. Mm-hmm. They didn't necessarily make anything better. They weren't necessarily even more entertaining. But it's just, I think, an example, an outgrowth of fantasy doesn't work for us in the face of such things.
In the face of race riots and assassinations.
Yes.
We don't want to hear about Cleopatra anymore. Let's get us grounded. So, right, exactly. And that's why Bullet, The French Connection, again, also...
I'm glad you mentioned that.
A tremendous car chase scene.
That's a huge moment for car chases.
Yeah, and French Connection is really... it's the gritty movie of the 70s.
And you could make it... For those who might object to Bullet being number one, they're probably doing so because they want The French Connection to be number one. It was that big. And, hey, Gene Hackman, we love Gene Hackman. He's one of the greatest actors that ever was. I mean, Lex Luthor, greatest criminal mind of our time. Come on. He's fantastic in just about anything.
So those are your starting points. Mm-hmm. What really attracted me to this subject and this idea, though, it is really more these one set in the modern South. Because this is an area, and we've talked about this before with Japan, to a degree, this is a defeated area searching for an identity. So you have...
Oh, do tell.
Gator, White Lightning, Eat My Dust, and Grand Theft Auto with Ron Howard. His first steps into not just adult acting, but also directing, when he would eventually become, this prolific American director. And Burt Reynolds called these films, especially White Lightning, the beginning of a whole series of films made in the South, about the South, and for the South. And they didn't really even care if these got widespread distribution because they would be so attractive in cities in the South. You can make back your costs, he said, in just Memphis alone. But when you think about Memphis and Atlanta and Florida
New Orleans,
and New Orleans, you really could make these films profitable with just this sort of narrow focus on, where is the South headed? How do you be a rebel without really being a rebel anymore?
Right. Well, that's an interesting because we used that phrase earlier about being a rebel, and you used it right after I was thinking to myself about how I look at some of these, and a lot of these are ways to say to give the middle finger to the man.
Yeah, it's
in a unique way.
Yeah,
because
it's a uniquely American way for sure.
It is, yeah,
in a uniquely Southern way.
And yes,
because it's not a countercultural way, like a hippie way, but it's it's a Leonard Skinner. Like
these are the guys who went to Vietnam, not the hippies,
right? And they're back, and then you're right. How do you be anti-establishment in a different way than the hippies?
Ironically, it's very similar in approach to the entire blaxploitation method. It's the urban communities giving the middle finger to the man. It's just a totally different starting point, but it's the same action.
Right. A lot of the heroes in these, like especially Smokey and the Bandit. I mean, that's the I guess the prime example of the hero is actually a criminal. Mm-hmm. And that's the guy we're rooting for. The bad guy is the sheriff.
That's right.
Although, how Jackie Gleason could ever be the bad guy is beyond me. He's a national treasure.
But he does it so well. Oh my gosh, he does so great.
Yeah. He's some bitch!
That's right. He's not Ralph Cramden. He's not. And that says something about the talent of the man, for sure.
Yes. Yeah, he's extremely talented.
It's a uniquely Southern way of flipping the paradigm of the Robin Hood type story. Here's the anti-establishment figure who is not the racist, who is not the authoritarian figure. You flip it on its head, and the authoritarian figure who's supposed to be respectable, he's the one that's the racist.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
it speaks to some of the undercurrent of the South that's not so pleasant, and recognizing, I think, we're not all like that. In fact, that's the stuff we want to get rid of. We want to keep certain things that are good, and that's not one of them.
This is a time of great change in the South as well, when you think about it. Because, you're talking about the decade after the great push for the civil rights laws to be changed, for the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then there's been a Civil Rights Act of practically every Congress has passed one, because they got it, whether there's any real teeth in it or not. But there's affirmative action going on. So culturally, things are changing in the South just because they're moving past, or trying to anyways, moving past that racist historical past. Mm-hmm.
And recognizing we don't have to completely strip ourselves of everything in order to do that.
Right. Yes. And I think a lot of...
We can have a unique American cultural identity that is positive, and it can come from the bottom up. It can percolate through the regular people.
Right.
We can be the ones who set aside this past.
And they have to be. And realistically, that's the only way that works. Mm-hmm. You can only legislate so far.
Right.
At some point, the man on the street has to set that stuff aside.
I mean,
and the culture that you express through things like this helps.
Yeah. And I get that we're ascribing a lot of deep existential meaning to a movie that's about a guy driving a Firebird to Texarkana to get beer.
Right.
Which a
lot of people don't even get. Why is it such a big deal to bring a truckload of beer across state lines?
Yes.
But back then it was.
Yes. Otterites, if you're a younger Otterite, at one time, the country was kind of divided. You could only get Coors west of the Mississippi, and you could only get Budweiser east of the Mississippi. That's all changed now, but... that was the idea.
It's an anachronism to watch the movie today, because you're right. Unless you lived it, you don't what?
Yeah, but
it was watching it in the '80s. It's like or as a kid, because didn't really understand the whole beer thing as a kid watching it. But it's like I still don't get it. What's the big deal? But you're
doing something
because we didn't live
to.
That experience.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I had family in Texas, so I got it because when we visited, Dad could have a Coors in Mesquite, Texas.
There you go.
Yeah, and he couldn't get them here. So, and so you got to drive to Texarkana and back with 400 cases of Coors, which was bootlegging at the time.
Right.
So, but there was, it's just this moment of how to be a rebel in a different way, how to forge the New South. And then there's this hilarious movie, Jerry Reed and a basset hound in the truck.
Stick some groceries down my neck.
That's right. Kind of look like Fred to me. Ow!
And then the intersection of this new form of communication that's very personal, the CB radio.
Yes.
Which, if you don't remember
That
the 70s...
kicked off the craze. Oh, my
yes,
gosh.
Yes, it was...
The CB radio was the thing. In
Yeah.
the set. You went to Radio Shack and bought one and had somebody put it in your car.
That's right. And everybody... It was just... it was the thing. It was just like 2 years. 77, 78, 79, maybe.
Yeah.
And it fizzled out very quickly. But that summer when Smokey and the Bandit came out, you had to have one. It was just a thing.
Yeah.
Well, it was the only way to communicate. I mean, when you were on the road, and everybody, it was like a portable shortwave in that sense.
Yeah.
For those aficionados of that. But, in the days of cell phones, what's the point?
Yeah.
Other than the fact that it's a party line.
It's Snapchat of the time.
Yeah. To put it in those terms, yeah.
Well, it has. I mean, my lord, there was just there was music that came out of it. I mean, we remember C.W. McCall and Convoy.
Oh yeah,
that was a big country hit at the
again,
time.
Another anti-establishment film.
Uh-huh.
Ali McGraw and Chris Christopherson,
Which based on the song of all things, because
it was so big they made a movie out of it.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think your point about how to be a rebel in this new age, I think that's fascinating because, in a way, it was trying to, or at least it seems after the fact, trying to legitimize, in a respectable way, being not necessarily irresponsible, being that rebel, being somebody who bucked the system, but not so much that that there were a whole lot of consequences for it. It's almost like it was a safe way.
It was.
Yeah.
Because, Smokey didn't get caught.
And they weren't running from a bank robbery like Bonnie and
Bandit
Clyde.
didn't get caught. Smokey was the police.
Right.
Yeah. Again, it's not Bonnie and Clyde. It's 400 cases of beer. We're just driving to a car race.
Right.
Yeah, because the whole point was to get the beer back there to Big and Little Enos before the Southern 500.
And you don't get much more Southern than a car race.
Yeah, so it's NASCAR, it's beer drinking, and
fast cars.
It's
a perfect storm.
Can you tell that I've watched Smokey and the Bandit way too often?
Can you watch it way too often?
That may be one of those movies where it's not possible to watch too often.
It's just fun. It's always fun.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about that movie that is so good. I mean, there's that era had many great movies, but this is not Jaws. That is a very different movie that took the world by storm. This is something. This blockbusters just started at this point. This was one of those blockbusters that changed everything.
An unintentional blockbuster.
Exactly, because they didn't spend much money on the darn thing.
No.
I mean, it didn't cost much.
Most of your cost was just getting everybody where you were filming.
Burt Reynolds maybe. That's but even that, he was not that huge yet. He was big, but
he was.
Well, this was probably his
since
biggest
Deliverance. He was that was he had been a star.
Oh yeah, he was able to carry a movie.
Absolutely,
and that's true. But his star rose considerably after this one because he realized, oh my gosh, he made how much money in that movie? And that's why you have movies like Hooper and Smokey and the Bandit 2, which, let's be honest, guys, stank like a steaming pile of you-know-what.
Yeah, it's pretty stinky.
And it was because it was trying to capture on something that said, let's do this again, folks. I'm sorry they rushed it because the storyline about moving a circus elephant just didn't have the...
Right. I mean, sometimes you just can't capture lightning in the bottle twice.
That's right.
It's a different moment. It's a different era. And again, a lot of the pieces that made you feel about Smokey and the Bandit are just gone.
I remember going to see number 2 the weekend it came out and thinking, wow, I can't wait. I missed the first one. I've seen it on TV since then. Wow, this is going to be great. I'm going to be there. And they spend the first 15 minutes putting the whole team back together. This is going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. I'm going to like Jerry Reed. I get to be the Bandit. Boom. And then you go, what? About 10 minutes later, you go, that's it? and you leave the place like you've just been smacked with something and thinking, I paid how much for that?
It's kind of like Caddyshack 2. It's like, just don't.
Some things do not need a sequel.
That's right.
Just leave it alone. Just leave it alone.
Give it a miss, brothers.
Yes,
give it a miss.
Yes, give it a miss.
So again, some of these the car as this metaphor for what it means to be an American. The freedom, the driving. But then there's also other things hanging over our head in this moment. The fallout from Vietnam, the fallout from Watergate, a search for meaning.
That's right. As far as the country goes, we were trying to reestablish a national identity as a people.
Yeah,
Right.
not just the South was.
Right. And recognize, too, this is the same era as gas lines, energy crises, and Iranian crisis. This is right, it might be a little early for that.
A little bit before
but it's during that time, yes.
Right.
But
it's
you're
right after the first oil shock
Right.
and right around this time of the second one.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Driving your car
Really fast?
really
using
fast
up all that
and using
gas?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the death of the muscle car that meant so much to that late 60s youth identity.
Yeah, well, these movies, especially something like Smokey and the Bandit, but a lot of these, as I said, it's a way to buck the system in a relatively safe way, but ultimately, it's about being an individual. It's about you, the person, as opposed to a cause or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very escapist. In
Trans
that
Am
sense.
was endemic of that. You know how many of those damn things that were sold after that movie came out?
Oh, yeah.
That
How many
was
virginities were lost in one of those?
yeah,
A lot.
I was going to say, because that was the thing. Because if you could afford one of those, you were somebody. It became not only a status symbol, but a sexual virility symbol too.
Well, and then there was the poor man's Trans Am, which is the Firebird, which is essentially the same damn car.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't have the screaming chicken on the hood.
That's right.
But another one that's of this moment too, that I remember seeing a long time ago, that's very affecting, is a film called Vanishing Point.
You spoke about that. We talked about it in show prep. And if you were to Google best car chases, it's right up there, top 5 every single time. I got to admit to you folks, I've not seen it.
It's very affecting. It's about a man named Kowalski, with not a lot else known about him.
Sounds like Boys at the Bottom of the Sea.
He's a veteran. He is a driver. He delivers cars. He picks up a muscle car in Denver and is supposed to deliver it to San Francisco. He decides to do it as fast as he possibly can. He's on amphetamines to do it. So, of course, the more he takes of this, the more warped his perspective is. Cleavon Little plays Super Soul, the DJ of a radio station who's trying to help him.
Love Cleavon Little.
And we love Cleavon Little.
Loves Cleavon Little.
And, of course, it's very anti-establishment about the police. But unlike Smokey and the Bandit, it does not have a happy ending. He decides to drive the muscle car into a bulldozer scoop. And
the movie's over.
And that's it. It explodes.
It's like Thelma and Louise going off the cliff.
Yeah. But it's a very affecting film. Again, that flip side of the coin, that duality.
Shows the flexibility and the versatility of the concept.
Yeah.
You don't have to be just a fun-loving Southern thing. Car chases can be all sorts of uses.
So then, of course, you go from there to all these great cable favorites of the 80s. Mm-hmm. Post-apocalyptic car chases become fun.
Oh, well, we got to talk about the Road Warrior. And I know you want to do your impersonation. Let's give you the opportunity.
My impersonation of Mel Gibson. 2 days ago, I saw a vehicle that hold that tanker. You want to get out of here? You talk to me.
That's right. Fantastic.
Well, I think that deserves a toast.
That's right.
A good time for a bourbon break.
Exactly,
yes,
that's right.
Place to stop for a bourbon
Very
break.
good, actually. Very, very good. I mean, you did that in the show prep. I'm thinking, okay, I'll sign on to that.
That was
one.
much better.
He practiced it originally, and he had it. We gave him the right tee up, so he was ready.
A little bit more Australian in that one.
Yeah,
that's okay.
2 days ago. So what do you have, Francis?
I am still sticking with the Heaven Hill bottled in bond. I poured last time I had some. I poured a big old honking thing of it, and I just stayed with it. It's a burn. I didn't, I'm having it neat. I hate the word harsh, but it's true. But that's not a bad thing. I don't want that to have a negative connotation.
Full flavored.
Better. I want it more than even that.
I like to use the word burn better than harsh.
Burn is probably as close as I can get to what I'm trying to say.
You have to have gradations of burn to really describe that. So intense.
Intense is better. Intense is really good. Yeah, that's getting closer to what I'm saying. Yeah.
And what do you have, Robert?
I have, like Francis, I am still finishing the 46. As listeners have probably figured out by now, we mostly record multiple episodes at one time.
Yeah, batch record.
Yes. And so our last recording was so short, I didn't even get a chance to finish that one. So I am still nursing the Maker's 46.
That's a peek behind the door, Otter.
That's right.
That's right.
Sometimes,
here you can pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did finish, because I didn't pour very much. I finished my Heaven Hill bottled and bond.
You freshened up, did something different.
And so I've got some of Robert's Devil's Cut.
Good Devil's stuff. Cut. Yeah.
Yes.
So again, a little bit more of the intense flavor.
That's what I was going to go for if I had finished this.
Yeah. So
I like that as a good change. I tend to go with the smoother,
unique. Yeah,
it's full flavored stuff like the Woodford Double Oaked or the Four Roses. But I like that when I want a change.
This is very full flavored. I've added some ice, so I've got water changing the flavor a bit. Changing that intensity, changing that burn. But, boy, that's good. It's good for a nice big swallow here.
That's right. And,
a little lubricity for talking about Smokey and the Bandit.
And for those of you who are distillers, if you would like to have us feature your bourbon on a bourbon break, we are more than happy to do so. You just need to contact us at our website, snakesandotters.com. Send any one of us an email, and we'll get things set up for a small financial remuneration.
Yeah, there's a link to our Twitter right there on Snakes and
We're
Otters.
a great spend. We really are.
We are.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Bourbon and biscuits, man. That's us.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Biscuit Belly, we love you.
That's right.
And yes, we will have more gravy. Yes, we will.
Would you like more gravy?
Absolutely. Bring it on. Here. May I have some more, please? That's all right.
So, yes, The Road Warrior, post-apocalyptic car chasing. Surely that's not the only film like that. But I'm drawing a blank here. I know there's got to be others.
Well, the whole Mad Max series, franchise, as it were, was all about that. I mean,
it was all about vehicles. Yeah.
Well, the chase was actually part of the thing. This one just happened to be probably the best one of that. They kind of went a little bit more. Now, when they did Fury Road in I forget the year, but it was in the 2000s. It was
the remake.
The remake. It was very good, but it was very different, sort of. But they just took what they could do today. But it's still a car chase movie. It's still a chase movie. Mad Max, the original, was very, very different. It was motorcycles, and it was cheap, and it was Mel Gibson's first movie. If you got the UK version, which you can get now, he's undubbed. They dubbed him in the United States because that Australian accent was pretty dang on thick at the time. But The Road Warrior is still the one that stands out that most people remember of all those. It had something to it.
I don't know, I think people think of the Mad Max one because I think it got wider viewing. The second one.
That's what I'm talking about. The Road Warrior.
Oh, okay.
That's
right. That is the second one. Yeah,
that's
right,
the one that actually. The other one was low budget. It was mostly Australian. This was the intention, and it was kind of like a cult thing. And they said, "Well, let's do this again." And Gibson was not a huge star, but he was up and coming at the time. And you could argue that's the movie that made him a star because it got widespread distribution. And people realized, "Oh crap, this is good."
But it's another one that was released at that moment of
it's
cables penetrating.
You're talking
the household, the American household.
So you get it.
And you got to fill in HBO. You got to fill in Showtime.
Well, this is why you get Excalibur is so good because it comes out in '80 and we see it all over. It's Conan the Barbarian and all that whole fantasy, high fantasy stuff.
It's on all the time.
They realize, we've got a market for this after the theaters, so we can actually make a life for this thing and build up some. Over time, some idea for franchises, which is kind of what happened with the...
Right, which, we've seen sequels, but it really had not taken off yet.
Franchises... A franchise is really not... I mean, other than Bond, what else do you have at this point? Star Wars is beginning that.
Right, and Star Wars didn't make it to cable for years.
Yeah.
So
at this point, you've probably got Empire... maybe even, it depends on when you're talking about here. That really wasn't...
No, Jedi was about 83. So,
right. So
they were done before, Reagan's second term started.
Right. So, there's... And even so, that was intended as a trilogy...
From the beginning. Well, not entirely from the beginning, but yes.
And it was not necessarily... franchise is something bigger than trilogy.
It's a franchise now because they've done...
Oh, exactly. It's become that.
Yeah.
I guess you'd have to talk to Lucas and see what his thoughts were. You would know Robert more than I would.
When he first made the Star Wars, which in a way you could argue Star Wars is a car chase movie.
Well, there's plenty of it. That's right.
Because there's a lot of chasing around in vehicles.
Well, I mean, Lucas himself said he based much of that on the movie The Searchers with John Wayne, which is essentially one big chase the whole time. It's just with horses instead of cars.
Right. So I mean, there is an element that we like in our movies when you got the bad guys chasing the good guys. Mm-hmm. You know that is a theme,
or the good guys chasing the bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, either one works.
But not to get off on Lucas, but I mean, he didn't know if he could make the other movies.
Absolutely.
So that's why he started with that one. Because as we all know, there's a prequel and then there's the sequels.
Right.
And that was a whole big thing.
Nobody knew it would be as big as it was. I don't think.
But there's so many different things that because. I think, and you can look at it in movies. You can also look at it in television. Dukes of Hazzard is Smokey and the Bandit on TV.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's that. And that actually had a
because it's got all the same elements.
Right, fairly long life, which is kind of amazing because if you watch those now, you realize this is the same story every week, and they were catching it because people wanted it, but it should never have lasted as long as it did.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you why it lasted that long.
Is a bit of a one-trick pony.
Daisy Duke.
Yeah, Catherine Bach.
Yes.
Well, there's
a reason shorts are called Daisy Dukes.
There's no doubt in my mind that she is a generously beautiful lady, and still is actually. Even these many years later, if you catch a picture of her, you can see. Yes, she's just one of those classic beauties.
But
but anyway,
it's a lot of the same theme tends to show up in a lot of these, and really, it's the same theme that we've talked about. We talk about a lot of stories, and it's that hero's journey thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the hero, like with Mad Max, he's the reluctant hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah.
He was that.
That's a very common theme throughout a lot of these cards. Is that reluctant hero? Again, Vanishing Point being someone people are glomming onto because they're listening to Super Soul direct him to avoid the police. Right. So they're becoming emotionally invested in his journey.
Even though he's an anti-hero.
Yeah, even though it ends in destruction.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, not all of them are hero's journey kind of things. So, like, Smokey and the Bandit is not a hero's journey story.
No.
By any stretch of the imagination. No. Because, I mean, let's face it, he's an idiot. He's a jerk. He's not the kind of guy you want your daughter to hang out with, right?
That's correct.
You might want to hang out with him, but
have a beer with him. Yeah, I mean,
he's got 400 cases of Coors. Come on.
Yeah,
let's have some.
But there's a lot of that, especially when you're looking at the reluctant hero or the anti-hero striving against some injustice. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that in a lot of these. So I think that's what ultimately makes them appealing for a broad audience. Where they really take off is when they, I think, either have that unique twist to it, like Fred. I think Fred is what made that movie. No, I'm just kidding. But when there's some unique twist to it, or when there's some particular cultural aspect they can.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's true. In many respects, Robin Hood is very much what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
This is the guy that's out with and for the common man. And that resonates. That's always going to resonate with a great many people.
Not Smokey and the Bandit, because the Bandit was actually doing it for what you could essentially say is corporate interests.
Yes, but he was an everyman. He was an everyman. That's right. He was not only the guy that you could see yourself having a beer with, but he's the guy you also wanted to be.
Yes.
So he has that both.
Yes.
He's the hero as well as the change bringer of things, fighting against injustice. So there's
injustice is very loosely defined there.
Well, yes, that's correct. Yeah, in his mind. Yeah.
Vanishing Point is the same way. It's a very loosely defined injustice there.
I find this fascinating as a statement on where the South is at that moment. Again, you're only 10 years removed from digging dead civil rights workers out of an earthen dam in Mississippi. But Bandit isn't portrayed that way.
Yeah.
He's the hero in a new South who isn't a racist. Mm-hmm. And this idea of searching for an identity,
A reinvention
of the South at this moment. And again, like Reynolds says, these films are predominantly made for Southerners. You know, Leonard Skinner's recording music for Southerners.
And Southern rock, the whole thing.
But it blossoms beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it turns into something really big that speaks to people across the country.
Well, I think a lot of what was going on in the South, even though it was made for Southerners, maybe it was so much more acute for the South because it was the flashpoint for the Southern or for the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
But much of the country was still going through the same thing, coming to grips with having to change and seeing everybody as people, you know, real people, not just, you know, other.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Them.
Yeah. Oh, that's very much. That's the them.
So I think that's why some of these things, especially when you see, because again, in most of these, like I said, it's a way to kind of safely. Because you're watching, you're not actually the one doing it, but you know you can vicariously be that rebel by sympathizing with whoever the anti-hero is. But I don't know. I think for the rest of the country, that's what is. I guess hard to articulate properly here, which is I know is very unusual for me because I can go on and on.
I think you're right.
I am stunned, sir.
Living vicariously through the bandit is a huge part of the appeal of this film.
Right.
Because who wouldn't want to drive a Trans Am with a cute girl
to
Texarkana?
And back. And you know, that's another thing, that another Bollywood film was you transporting, well, she wasn't a minor, but transporting her across state lines and back. You know, there was a time when that would have been a federal crime.
That's what Buford T. Justice wants to charge him with.
Right.
It's the Mann Act.
Exactly.
I don't think he's got a permission. That's the Mann Act.
So, you know, but that living vicariously, the reason that's why it took off, these kinds of things took off, is because, you know, again, you're coming off the 60s, you're coming off the crap decade that was the 70s, or you're in the middle of it.
You're in the middle of,
And there was not, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of hope and happy stuff going on in the 70s.
The middle of the malaise.
Right.
And here's a guy having a ball.
Exactly. Doing stuff you only wished you could.
That's right. And people picked up on that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you know, the 70s was kind of crappy. I'm glad you brought that up because that's, in many respects, there's the appeal, folks.
Yeah.
It's because the 70s is pretty crappy. And, you know...
I mean, other than a few cultural high points,
the Bicentennial was kind of cool.
Bicentennial was cool.
But that was
because, you know, it's a great moment of patriotism in the middle of this when, at a time, patriotism was not cool.
That's correct. Yeah.
You know, you had
but
Star Wars
got on board on that,
changed the, you know, fantasy could be good again, sci-fi could be good again, but it took time for all this stuff to work its way back into the essence of the culture.
We had to be ready for it.
Yeah.
We had to be ready for it.
It sparked it, and you start to see things change as far as entertainment goes.
We were hungry for it, too. That was part of it, too.
We were still looking for somebody to look up to and... you know, wanted to be, because there just wasn't a whole lot of that.
We don't ever run out of the need for heroes.
No, never.
But we might think we do.
Oh, I think a lot of time we do.
Yeah. Oh, that's very right, Francis. That's very right. We think we're beyond the need for heroes, but we never really are.
That's right.
Too often, and this is, I think, one of the problems that a lot of entertainment has today, is your heroes have to be flawed. Sometimes flawed deeply.
I think that's a fallacy.
It's more realistic, but
I get it.
That's not, your heroes shouldn't have to be realistic for you to have them as a hero. And so, just to illustrate this is getting off the car chase thing, but I think it illustrates the hero thing. So, Falcon and Winter Soldier is ongoing and by the time this airs, it will be done.
Right.
So there should be no spoilers for anybody. In last night's episode, they're talking about those who get the super soldier serum, because that's part of the plot, is that they've managed to recreate it, and bad guys have gotten it, basically. Okay, and Baron Zemo, Daniel Bruhl's character, who's an excellent actor, by the way.
I know.
Love him.
I was hoping
he's in The Alienist as what a psychologist was,
right.
A psychiatrist was an alienist. Anyways, he says that those who are super soldiers always corrupt. And they point out Steve didn't.
That's correct.
It's like, granted, but he's the exception. Because that's why I always go back to him. He's the epitome of hero.
Mm-hmm.
His flaw, his only flaw, in my opinion, is that he doesn't, until the last movie, doesn't get anything for him. And that's not his flaw. It's a flaw in the story. Mm-hmm. But often, it's because he's a tragic hero in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But that's often the problem with the tragic hero. They don't get anything for him or her.
Yeah.
But in the end, he does get his life.
It proves Erskine's theory as to choosing the right person.
Yes.
Which is, bringing it full circle back. A weak man knows the value of strength, the value of power. One of my favorite lines in that first movie. Mm-hmm. And it nails it. Exactly. That's why he is a hero. It is not the super soldier serum that makes a hero. It's the man
He's
inside.
the hero before he ever takes it.
That's right. You're just giving the means of actually realizing it in a meaningful manner.
Yeah. Now, and all these heroes we're talking about the anti-heroes in the 70s car chase movies and other places we've talked about, almost nobody is a hero like Captain America. I mean, he's unique in that respect. Maybe that's what makes him stand out. Maybe he's the hero's hero.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But, in a way, that's what makes all of these other heroes we talk about in these movies stand out. And not stand out, but what makes them, I don't want to say different, because they're different from him anyways. Maybe you could say makes them tragic in their own ways, makes them anti-heroes in their own ways, whatever. But, and maybe because people know they can't be Cap, they'd rather go down this road because they'd be a little bit of a rebel and still a hero at the same time.
They could be the bandit. You could be the bandit.
Yeah, anybody can be the bandit.
Anybody can be the bandit. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's the to me the centerpiece of Winter Soldier is at the end, and Fury is looking at Sam. He says, "What about you, Wilson?" And he says, "I just do what he does, only slower." There's just no question about following Steve.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You just know this. I can follow him. Everything's going to work. Bandit's kind of the same way. I can follow Bandit. Everything's going to be all right. Mm-hmm. I just love that we took this film and car chases in general, car chase films, and turned it into this analysis of the zeitgeist of America in the 1970s. Because there is no more 70s movie than Smokey and the Bandit.
Right.
Oh, yeah. You're exactly right.
It is that moment of...
It's a good reflection.
How do we recover and find ourselves after Watergate, after Vietnam, after Dr. King is killed, after Robert Kennedy is killed? Well, here's what we can do. We can get in a really fast car and we can drive to Texarkana and get some beer.
Because we're Americans and that's what Americans do.
America. So... All right, well, that's pretty good, dudes. That's pretty good. I love this episode. I know there's nothing left to tell the Otterites to do or anything, because every Otterite has probably seen Smokey and the Bandit. But I do recommend seeing it uncut. Yes. Forget about the TBS version and all that. Get the real thing, the raw, uncut, Jackie Gleason really saying all the things that he said version of Smokey and the Bandit. You'll love it. A credit to Hal Needham, the director, who's an old stunt man, directing it. And, of course, Burt Reynolds, it revolves around him.
He pulled it off.
He made it.
Not just
anybody. That laugh?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, not everybody could have done
laugh
that.
is just awesome. Yeah. That movie alone for his laugh is good.
Yeah, so I don't recall who wrote it, but I'm sure basically... Burt Reynolds wrote it, essentially.
He brought it to life, certainly.
Yeah, his ideas. So, it's a fun movie. So, Francis, buddy, what is next?
We're going back to history. We go back to World War II. It's June. What do you think we're going to talk about?
Yes.
We're going to talk about
Christmas
D-Day.
in the Solomons.
No, we're talking about D-Day, of course. 1944, June 6th. Operation Overlord. Yeah, it was one of those big moments. There's so much to talk about. I had a great uncle who was in the invasion second day. He's told me stories. I can maybe relate a few of them. We all have lots of. We have some of this it's become such a huge thing for us. And I'm not just talking about Saving Private Ryan, although that's not a bad one.
I prefer The Longest Day myself.
Correct, and I know that we'll talk about that because movies reflect a lot of this stuff, but we're going to try and get underneath just a little bit. Just see what exactly was it, why was it so important, how it almost didn't happen and almost didn't succeed, because it really was a near-run thing, as Wellington would have said. And we're going to explore that deeply and wonderfully next episode. Be here.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.